Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain style review events are part of the problem. If I had written that title, what would follow would be a fiery indictment of a games press who, year after year, through their lack of integrity and unwillingness to report on or criticize one another, have allowed the standard of what's acceptable as a sacrifice in access journalism to reach an incredibly disgusting point. But I didn't write the title. Eric Kain did, and so what follows is a portrait of powerless critics without the agency to combat the environment they've been dumped into. Let's talk about game review media events. Tightly organized, often somewhat lavish press events where the gaming media is holed up inside some nice hotel for a few days to review a game. This is what was on offer for Metal Gear Solid 5. The only reviews for Metal Gear Solid 5 you'll be able to read at this point are from reviewers who spent time playing in these boot camps, or a handful of critics well connected enough to land a review copy before launch. The rest of us, too bad. I'm just so sorry to hear that. How are you holding up, and has Konami done anything else to you? Except that's not even really true, is it? It's not too bad. There is something they can do, and this article is one example of it. Even if this piece is self-serving, it does almost fulfill the role of what would be needed to counter this kind of thing. Why do I say self-serving? Well, because he's painting this as something that screws up competition between critics and is saying, this is important to fix. Yeah, to you, of course it is. And I think this is the perspective a lot of writers have. It's also what's holding them back from fixing it, ironically. There is a link to this piece in the description, and I recommend you read it in its entirety, because in this video I'm going to be jumping around quite a lot. He mentions Gamergate, but that he's saying Gamergate doesn't really matter. This is why I say Gamergate misses the forest for the trees. The relentless focus on indie developers is outlandish to me. These are small fish in a very, very big pond. The web of Patreon accounts and industry friendships between indies and game journalists is a footnote compared to the influence the multi-billion-dollar AAA business holds over gaming media. There's nothing at all wrong pointing out where indie devs and game journalists have had questionable relationships, but to say it's a bigger problem than AAA is absurd. Although you may know my views about Gamergate, where I support it as, it's a hashtag, people can use it, you shouldn't have any guilt attached. I also support the ideas of a lot of people. Whatever. What I'm saying is, it doesn't matter who he's talking about. It doesn't matter what someone thinks is a bigger problem. One reason I care more about indie stuff is because I don't really play AAA games. Or to be more accurate, I wait until they're really cheap. But that's looking at bigger in terms of what I care more about. What is more of a serious issue to me. Bigger in size and influence, yeah, he's absolutely right. AAA is way bigger, to the point that it needs to be journalists dealing with it. And he's kind of almost doing it in this article, but not really. He's not putting it on the critics. It seems like he's putting it on Konami and asking the public to fix it for him. Perhaps unfair, he is right that the public, or even Gamergate or anyone, could help this. Not directly, but through pressuring people like him to fuck up his peers if he sees them doing something dodgy. He provides an example near the end of something he thinks is bad. Readers may lack awareness of the circumstances under which a game was played and reviewed. And how aware are readers that this is what's going on? How many of the gaming sites who attended disclosed their attendance? Can you tell, reading a review from site A and one from site B, which is the site with a review copy and which is the site attending a boot camp? Only if they say. And they don't all say, wow, there is no other way to know. If only there was some kind of profession dedicated to reporting information to the public. Maybe if there was some kind of person who says they really care about this and also had access to events like that. Someone who could out the people who are sketchy. Someone with connections and a platform that other people don't have. Maybe someday. Instead, writers should continue to advocate that their audiences do something to make their lives easier. I mean, it's not up to them to have integrity, and of course nor is it up to them to act in the public's interest and try to keep their peers honest. The reasonable solution, of course, is to teach developers and publishers not to tempt, not to strap critics into an environment where they have handlers, food and drink provided by the game company itself, nothing to do but play the game all day, and then eat and drink in the evening. This cruel torture needs to be stopped, and we know the critics themselves are born with bits of their brain missing, so they are unable to say no. But to bring this video back to seriousness, all of this happening is the fault of the press. We've seen it thrown around. People who use a hashtag need to police themselves. People who say they're this need to police themselves. The press is actually an example where they do legitimately need to police themselves, or more accurately, one another. They need to have integrity and they need to be courageous. The solution cannot be change the world so that the press doesn't get tempted. Sure, it would be good if Konami and people like that didn't try to do that, but it's not their responsibility. If the PR they hire isn't trying to do that, their PR sucks. If if the PR succeeds, the critics or journalists suck? Is it acceptable that the people representing your profession have these low standards? Oh no, they did it to me. They made me accept this. This is the environment I'm in. Pathetic. This is how the game industry and video game press works. The industry controls access through its PR channels. We in the press navigate this, balancing our need to bring readers information and insight against an industry that controls all the levers of access to content. It's a balancing act, and a not uncommon one across trade media. Yes, that is the balance that should be happening. The consideration should be, do the compromises I have to make outweigh the benefit to my audience? And what the press deems acceptable is what decides how much power these publishers and developers have. And I think that is absolutely down to press to deal with. If other people are accepting things and you think that goes too far to the point of doing a disservice to the public, I think you need to point that out. You need to kick them in the dick. Not just say, here's something you should be concerned about, here's a nice little friendly article where I don't really have to commit to anything. I'll explain where I'm coming from. The practice of accepting pre-release games to review. If everyone accepts that, you've accepted that developers and publishers can have some control over the press at large. They decide which outlets they want to support by providing a copy. By those who are offered it accepting it, and those who are not protesting that, they've accepted that practice. And of course, I think that's reasonable. The downside is that these companies have a hand in press. The upside is that if they didn't do that, consumers wouldn't have information about the game until post-launch. I think that benefit outweighs the cost. For an example of consideration of a trade-off that wasn't considered too hot, look at the Assassin's Creed Unity thing last year. It led to Stephen Totilo saying it's going to be policy now that if Kotaku's got a review ready and the only thing stopping it is a post-release embargo, they will not respect it. And Polygon criticized it, but the news editor still said, well, I think the trade-off's worth it. If major outlets say anyone who tries to pull this will not get covered, it will stop. They do have power, and a situation where I believe its use can be fairly justified as being in service of the public. They're just unwilling to exert it. And it makes sense, because we are looking at a game now. If you are an outlet or critic and you say, no, not covering this game, I think what they're doing is harmful to my audience and the gaming public in general, and I'm not going to support that, I refuse. You risk simply being the only critic or outlet that doesn't review that game. What would ideally happen is that someone does that and then other people copy, and then the dev or publisher has to say, oh alright, fine, I won't do this. You have to make it not worth it for them to do that. But of course the fear is that no one will copy you afterwards, so no one goes first. And of course if they got together behind the scenes and talked about this and colluded to make sure there wasn't that risk but they could still talk about it, I wouldn't be entirely comfortable with that either. And that's why you can have various critics and outlets saying, you need to go after AAA. It solves that problem for them without any of them having to have the fucking balls to stand up for what they think is right. That way, you sort it and none of them have to risk missing out on coverage while their competitors don't follow suit. Having said all this is just me disagreeing with Eric Kain's solution or approach, I guess, or commentary about who should be concerned about it. I do agree that they are a problem, so what I'll say is, at the moment I'm a nobody, but I do look at games. In the future, I may have some kind of influence, so I'll set this rule out now. If a pre-release review event like this is connected to your game will never come on this channel. If I ever do something with a game that had something like that attached and I find out later, I will delete that video and put up a video explaining what happened. I think this practice absolutely goes too far. I do not think that critics who accept these events can justify the balance, and I refuse to support it in any way. Hopefully someone in a position of actual influence will decide to do something to enact change. But, as usual, that's just another one of my harmful opinions.